Hello, my friends. My name is Darren Gerdes. This is a daily brief. It's Saturday, May 11th, 2024. The losses on the battlefield are pretty significant again today. It went down a little bit yesterday, but it was up at 13 and change the day before. 1,320 Russians off the battlefield. 15 tanks, 40 armored vehicles, 55 artillery pieces, 64 vehicles and fuel tanks. So there's some significant fighting. Most of the significant fighting is around Kharkiv, although there's another pocket that we'll pay attention to as well. So this was yesterday. I'm going to pause that. So I'm just showing the picture. Yesterday, this is Anton Gerashenko, the air raid alert in Kharkiv region lasted continuously for 12 and a half hours. Wow. 12 and a half hours of an air raid alert. So Kharkiv came under significant attack. But was that an invasion of Kharkiv, or was it peacocking from the Russian side? That's the question. So Russian troops captured villages in Kharkiv as battlefield expands. Ukraine repelled attacks on multiple settlements. Over 30 areas were shelled, dozens struck by aviation. Over 1,700, this was yesterday, over 1,700 residents evacuated. Some 5 civilians injured, killed in shelling of the villages. As of today, you see that 2,526 people have already been evacuated. That was earlier today. Same place. Okay, so the ISW, while Russia is unlikely to seize Kharkiv city, second largest city in Ukraine, due to lack of sufficient combat effective forces, and we're going to come back to that phrase again, due to a lack of sufficient combat effective forces, its offensive in the oblast aims to enable breakthroughs elsewhere in eastern Ukraine. So if we're looking at the map, here's Kharkiv, and here's the 2 directions from which they were attacking, and then we have a few important cities down here that we've been talking about for the last few months. Okay, so how many combat effective forces? They only have 50,000 soldiers around Kharkiv ready to attack it. 50,000 soldiers, 400 tanks, 930 armored vehicles, 990 supply vehicles, 120 MLRS rocket launchers. Sounds like a lot, but really, so Greg Terry and I were talking about this yesterday. We spent a little over an hour on this. And you think about the math. The math doesn't make sense to take Kharkiv, although if they took Kharkiv, it would be terrible, but it just doesn't make sense. So it could be that this is a feint, and that's what the ISW seems to be indicating here, that it might be a feint so that they can go somewhere else. It could be that they're just testing the lines, or it could be that they're trying to take the city. But as we were talking about it, like I did the math. About 1 million in the city. That's just a rough cut. You need about a 40-to-1 civilian to soldier in order to hold on to a city, and more if there's real resistance. And that would be 25,000 right there. And you only have a force of 50,000. A whole bunch of those are going to get killed in the process. And so it just doesn't make sense that they're actually trying to take Kharkiv, although they can take some areas around it, and they have to put some forces there in order to defend against that. So that's probably more likely what's going on, that there's some kind of probing efforts, but not actually trying to take the city itself. Okay, here, this was interesting. Now, and this goes back to what we were talking about with Greg yesterday as well. It's been reported that a Russian fighter aircraft accidentally released a FAB 500 munitions on a civilian area in Belgorod, Russia on 4 May 2024. I reported on that. The Belgorod regional government confirmed the explosion and the damage. Belgorod's without identifying the cause. 30 houses, 10 cars were damaged, with 5 individuals requiring hospital care, illustrating the destructive power of the munition. This is not an isolated incident. On 18 February, FAB 250 was reportedly released on Solati in the Belgorod area, which led to the evacuation of 150 residents. Media outlets suggest that such discharges are fairly common, with 20 lost munitions accidentally dropped in the Belgorod region alone between March and April 2024. Now, Greg had an interesting thought about that. Whether it's an accident or intentional, Russia doesn't really care about Belgorod, but will use whatever that is. It could have been an accident, but it could have been more nefarious. Russia will use what it is before another wave of mobilization, which will draw on this region, and all the bad things happening will play into people being patriotic and signing up to go fight for Russia. I don't know if that's true or not. It's an interesting thought, and they just don't, I mean, they may not care about that. I just don't know. Let's keep going. Russia unlikely to seize Kharkiv city despite the offensive efforts. So this is going back, I showed you the interesting beginning of that from the Twitter post, but here's the actual article. And here are the three areas that we're talking about here. The Institute for the Study of War on 9 May reported that Russian offensive operations along Kharkiv international border are likely to have the strategic objective of drawing and fixing Ukrainian forces to this axis to enable Russia's advances in other areas of eastern Ukraine. According to the ISW, Russian forces have sought to exploit opportunities for localized advances due to Ukrainian shortages. Like there are real legitimate mobilization shortages. They need more soldiers in Ukraine. Achieving tactical gains northwest and west of Avdiivka, as well as intensifying efforts toward Chasiv Yar. Okay, and Avdiivka and Chasiv Yar are two of the three that we've been just talking about for the last few months. Now, enemy intensifies offensive actions near Avdiivka, Kupiansk, and Bakhmut. No large-scale offensive in the north of Kharkiv region. So it's not really like they're doing what they're doing in Kharkiv, pulling more soldiers there, but the real action is still on the eastern line. Ukraine halts Russian advance, launches counterattack with U.S. military aid. So some aid has arrived and has been really meaningful in or near Avdiivka. New arrived American military hardware, including Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, played a key role as Ukrainian forces halted a Russian offensive near Avdiivka and launched a counterattack. And that was just within the last, overnight, last day or two. The Russian narrative is that Kharkiv is just being decimated. There's nobody there left. It's just being totally destroyed. Well, according to Russian propagandists, Kharkiv is panicked and empty. Meanwhile, at a market in Kharkiv, so it's not really like that. It's not, I mean, Kharkiv is a major city, million people, huge place. So it's really not like that. Here, taking a stroll around Kharkiv. The city is standing. There's no panic. Russia is trying to attack, but our army is holding. Okay. Nevertheless, Anton Goroshenko shows 5:30 a.m. Teenagers in Kharkiv are preparing for the prom. The Russians are advancing 30 kilometers away, but so far there's no shelling at this time. I'd still be a little nervous if I was preparing for the prom, given what's happened over the last day or two. Last little bit, nobody was taken by surprise. The Russians knew what the Ukrainians were doing. The Ukrainians knew what the Russians were doing. So nobody's been caught off guard here. The main focus is the Kharkiv region. Russian troops today attempted to expand operations against Ukraine. We understand the extent of the occupiers' forces, see their intentions. Our soldiers, our artillery, our drones are responding to the occupier, he said in his evening video address. Okay, last little bit, just because this is, I think, beautiful. Wow. Wow, that's the Northern Lights, and Northern Lights being observed by Ukrainian special forces in Donetsk, Ukraine, earlier this evening. That was last night. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person who cares about Ukraine. Special note to my board member level patrons. We're going to be doing our Zoom meeting either 2 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now. Let us know what works out best for you.